There's... Bear, it's okay. It really is. I promise. Hello, it's Matt O'Leary, and today we've got the fourth album from Californian metal band Deafheaven. It's called Ordinary Corrupt Human Love. There's no doubt that this band has really stolen the hearts of that indie pitchfork scene with this trending shoegaze and black metal of all things, hybrid sound that's way edgier than the typical R&B and indie rock fare that they would normally promulgate. And back in 2013, when their big smash hit album Sunbather came out, the conversation really revolved around where this band fit within the genre landscape, with plenty of efforts to squeeze, to contort the band into some categorical box. But in 2018, can we just be done with that conversation? I just feel like it's kind of boring, especially considering that most music fans really pride themselves on stripping their preconceptions of music before going into any album. It's funny though, because I feel like the open-mindedness and the willingness to try new things isn't always completely innocent. Like, I feel like it can sort of rear its ugly head when the sheer novelty and the sheer uniqueness of a band becomes the sole selling point, becomes the most important thing. Ooh, so shiny. And I do think that Sunbather may have been just a little bit overrated, even though there's a lot to love about that album. Like the Godspeed You level epic compositions, or the cascading layers of tremolo pick guitar, and the drummer Daniel Tracy, who in my opinion is far and away the star of the show. I think Sunbather flowed much better as a full album, but the peaks and the highlights of New Bermuda really won me over. I feel like the guitar work on that album is just so dynamic and so varied. I gotta say, you know, going into this review, that this band is really a gateway band for a lot of people, and I definitely include myself in that group. You know, I've loved progressive metal bands like Opeth, like Mastodon for a really long time, but the blackened screaming and the blast beats are still somewhat new to me. So with Ordinary Corrupt Human Love, I'm really psyched actually, because they really amplified the melodic guitar work from New Bermuda, but at the same time enhanced the full album listening experience and flow of Sunbather. We really get the best of both worlds on this thing. And they're not shy about this being the softest, easiest, and breeziest of Deafheaven albums yet. The opener, You Without End, is a lot like something from one of the early albums of the band Caspian, but I'd say even cleaner and even less effects driven. Those regal chord progressions set things up like a theatrical production almost, and those Queen-esque guitar arpeggios really just enhance the drama. I love the contrast between that female spoken word part, which has this very concrete narrative, with those more ambiguous screaming sections. We even get an H.P. Lovecraft monster reference in there. It's a piano ballad that really foretells of something big to come. And the second song, Honeycomb, just continues that journey with probably my favorite musical moment on this whole thing, and one that's just been stuck in my head. This major 7th chord transition takes us into this really cool part, and I tend to think of things in terms of musical intervals, so it's kind of like 4, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. Do 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 do. My love is a nervous child lapping from the glowing lagoon of their presence. Yeah, it's a little sappy, but it's pretty neat. And that sort of hyper-romantic and fanciful language is all over this album. You know, as hard as I try to think of the scream as just an arbitrary way of expressing yourself, just another musical expression, you know, who says you can't scream about daisies and unicorns? It's just not the case. You know, screaming is something that humans do when they're dying, or when they're in battle, or when they're pissed off. And whether you like it or not, screaming is associated with those extreme emotional states. So for me, screaming something so pretty, so fluffy, so sweet, with such urgency, with such ferocity, is just kind of goofy.
Evening chamomile, rose water, streams of buttermilk.
But honestly, it doesn't take away much from the overall experience of the album for me. I'm still able to really enjoy it, and it's not like I can really understand what he's saying anyway. And I'd much, much, much rather it be flowers and finches than Satan and torture. The first 3 tracks are the highlights on the album for me, and Canary Yellow is really the centerpiece and I think the boldest and grandest statement. We get this amazing dreamscape to open things up with reverbed out guitars and kind of a slow dive-like, very echoey tone, before things really start ramping up into a prog ride with these pummeling blast beats and double bass and as some of their most melodic guitar riffs. I can't help but love those very post-rocky, lazy vocal chants on this one or the next song, Near. It seems like the lights and the feathery moments of this album are much more compelling than on New Bermuda, but the heaviest moments are much less brutal. The song Glint is maybe the exception to that, being a very rare black metal love song. So heartfelt. But even there, George Clark's scream doesn't sound quite as anguished, quite as tortured as on songs like Vertigo or like Luna. That track flows beautifully into the next song, which is the oddball on the record called Night People, which features Chelsea Wolfe on vocals. The rhythms of the vocals, especially in the verses on this track, are a little bit awkward, but it does come to a really, really awesome climax with this marching snare that moves into these massive tom hits that reverberate and pan back and forth in the mix with the breathy vocals on top. It's really gorgeous. The song kind of peters out after that with this really weird verse about this barbiturate-influenced lady whose head rolls off and splashes gold everywhere as it bounces along. The final track, Worthless Animal, kind of redeems things in this way, with George singing about this homeless guy that he saw being attacked for no apparent reason, and he uses the metaphor of an innocent doe and a rabid dog to illustrate that. I also like how that track brings back some of the grandiose chord progressions from earlier on the album and fades them out slowly. It really bookends things in a neat and tidy way. I mentioned this before, and it's probably my biggest critique. It's something my friend said pretty well. It's that the intensity of the scream vocals paired with the fantastical, larger-than-life language used across the album does come off as a little bit haughty, a little bit self-important at times. Another thing about scream vocals in general is that they're necessarily limiting. And what I mean by that is that they're unvoiced, they're not voiced. So when you talk, you create a pitch, you create a tone. But when you're screaming, you're not really doing that. It's just air coming through. It's just so it's unvoiced. So your range of inflection and movement is a lot smaller because of that. So it's actually a lot more like rapping than it is singing. So there are times on this album when I want a strong melody to come out of the fold, when I want a personality, a stronger personality to emerge. George Clark's scream can be a little bit one-dimensional. But again, these criticisms are pretty minor and they don't detract much from my overall experience. The flow and the cohesiveness of the record, the instrumental performances and nuances, the emotional intensity of the peaks, it's all top notch. So it's a solid 7.5 out of 10 for me, and probably the Deafheaven album that I'll come back to most often. But let me know what you thought of it, and if there are any more black metal or just scream vocal metal albums that you think I might enjoy. As always, thank you so much for watching.